My name is Rich Cooper. For those of you who are new to GCVOA, I thought it might be appropriate if I kind of tell you a little bit about my background because I don't know many of you except for this past June at the camp. So I'm a previous board member and member at large with GCVOA. I'm also one of the former presidents, and my current position with the state is that I'm the state rules interpreter. So what that means is during the season, if you have a question as a referee about the application of a rule, you're going to be able to contact somebody. That somebody is me. That does not mean I want you to bypass your association with your board members, Jerry and Art and whoever else is on the board. I know Tony and Steve are on the board. But I am a resource provided to you by the state, just like every other sport has. I know basketball, football, etc. all have a designated rules interpreter. One of the other functions that I do in that capacity is I help out with the state tournament. So for those of you who have worked the state tournament before, or if you want to attend the 5A, 6A, is because it's going to be in the Tulsa area this year, you'll see me at that particular venue. So I also officiate volleyball collegiately and in the club season, which we just technically officially ended with both boys and girls junior nationals. There's going to be a few examples that I give you today from some of those club tournaments, and even though it's not the high school rule set, the application will be the same. So if you're like, man, I wonder what he's talking about, don't worry. It's all volleyball, and it all has to do with the same mechanic, all right? So I've titled this presentation, R1 and R2 Communication, subtitled, The Art of Teamwork. One of the things that's being taught at the national level is a phrase called the art of officiating, and I borrowed part of their phrase. The reason why I use the word art is much like other things that you've done in life, it's not simply a black and white or binary process. You don't just do this or do this. There's a lot of gray area when it comes to officiating. You guys, some of you are well versed in that thought process with other sports, but volleyball is no different. And so when Jerry contacted me about this particular presentation, this was my first thought. We need to address the aspect that it's not just the science of officiating. In this case, we're talking specifically about communication between the officiating crew, but there's an art form to this, all right? So as we move through the next hour and a half to 2 hours, again, if you have a question, ask it. If you have a comment, please make it. And let's see if we can make some headway on figuring out how to communicate a little more effectively. One of the items that we're going to be discussing is what do you do before, a week before, to be specific, the date of the match. Number two, what happens communicatively speaking day of the match when you are having your pre-match discussion with your partner. During play, and this is going to include both verbal and nonverbal applications of communication, and then our post-match discussion and exit. All right. So for those of you who have done basketball or football, you're probably maybe even a little more well-versed than we are in having an exit strategy after the contest is over. So Reza, in the world of soccer, does the center referee and the assistant referees talk about an exit strategy after the match? They better. Okay. All right. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Before, during, and after.
Before, during, and after was his response. So, we are no different. Now, for those of you who've been in the association for a while, you've already heard this. I understand, but for those of you who are newer to our association, specifically for volleyball, this may be something that you've never really thought about. But the phrase that I use is whistle and walk. I've also heard the phrase toot and scoot. Whatever you want to think about to remind you that when we leave the court, we need to know where we're going and we need to do it together. Again, we'll get to that part of the discussion later. What happens a week before the date of the match, or I should say what is supposed to happen. So since our communication director is here for GCVOA, I'm going to let Art Veros answer that important question.
Well, if it's just a match, if it's not a tournament, I send an email to the school, and that includes whatever contacts are on Arbiter. So that would include coaches, AD, whoever's available, as well as to whoever's officiating with me, if I am the senior referee that night. And I confirm date, time, and when everybody will be there. And expect to get a response back, at least from the school, and hopefully from my partners, so that I can confirm that they're going to be there on time.
So, very well said. Our one follow-up question to that, why would we want to do this a whole week ahead of time?
Things change.
Things change. Life happens. Right. So I don't know the expectations in other sports, and it doesn't really matter, but if you do officiate other sports, I would assume there is a similar process, whatever that is. So I want to make sure that you understand that GCVOA's expectation is that a week ahead of time, you are going to get some kind of notification from Arbiter, or about a week ahead of time. If Mike Goodall were here, he could tell you specifically, but regardless of when the day is, when you get that notification, the easiest way to do the communication process that Art was describing is simply to forward your email notice from Arbiter to your partner and to all the relevant contacts for that school. That's the easiest way to do it. Whether or not they respond, you can't control, but you can control whether you've initiated that communication process. David?
Would that be just the host school or both schools?
I typically do it with both schools, and that's a great question because, as Art said, things change. And last year, I actually was notified, hey, Rich, we are now going to have to switch sites. So it's not really just good enough to do it to the home institution. It's really better to do it with both coaches. And if you really want to get into the weeds, you can add the athletic director as well. Sometimes, and I just found this over 25 plus years of officiating, I've been contacted by the athletic director. Rich, we canceled the match. And my first question is, well, thank you for telling me that, but why didn't the coach contact me? Well, I had to do this. There was a reason behind the scenes, etc. So more pursuant to your point, David, I think it closes that communication loop, and it makes sure that no one is without notification. Question?
And I know all the sports I do, we always call the AD and actually physically talk to them and get a verification. Is that okay? Or just the
I would say that's a little overkill for our application. Just the culture of our sport allows for the email to suffice. Probably if individual officials were constantly contacting the athletic director, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm fairly certain Mike and Travis, as your assigners, are going to get a nasty gram and say, hey, tell the refs to stop calling us. Now, I understand the reason why you do it, and there might, for whatever sport to which you were referring, might have that application. We just don't have to do it at that level. That's a great question. Other questions about this? Yep.
So for the new person, for the new ref, should we just wait for the email from school where it comes from and then respond?
So let me clarify something that Art was mentioning. He used the term senior official, and what I would add to that is it's typically the purview of the R1 as the crew chief, even though we don't use that terminology. They are the ones who are typically supposed to initiate that. So whether you're new or not may not necessarily be the deciding factor of who starts that email chain. A great question. So I just put some reminders up here, emailing, texting, and calling. Any of those are fine. I would always suggest, though, that the email has to be part of that process. Day of the match. You start reffing before you ever arrive at the venue. I'm going to say that one more time. You start reffing or officiating before you ever arrive at the venue.
You're
mentally.
Think of
Absolutely, guys. In fact, I remember doing a clinic 5, 6, 7 years ago. We were at I believe we were at the Hardesty Library, and I made mention of the psychological factors that happen to officials the day of a match. You go to work, your boss gives you a project, you've got stressors going on at home, there's something going on with your kids or your grandkids or your neighbor or whatever. Before you even arrive at the venue, you're already processing a lot of information, and all of that is going to have to be managed by you in order to officiate the match that night. It doesn't matter what level of match you're doing. If you're doing a junior high match, you need to show up ready to do that junior high match. If you're doing a varsity, it really doesn't matter. So for those of you who do other sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is not a new concept, but I just felt like it was worth mentioning because I know that sometimes if I have a stressor in my day and I'm headed to a match, I just have to kind of do a little self-talk. Okay, Rich, got to clear that out. We're getting ready to do this. Whatever you take in with you is going to be seen pursuant to David's point. So kind of keep in mind, you're already reffing that match before you arrive. Some of the things that you also want to keep in mind is to text your partner, hey, I'm on my way to the venue. Just a heads up. I typically try to do that if I can remember. Now, to be fair to this point, I'm somewhat of a forgetful person, and if I'm reffing with you and I don't do that, I'm just going to do a mea culpa up front and hope that I work on forgiveness instead of judgment. If my ETA changes, I definitely need to communicate with my partner. If something comes up at work and you can't leave when you expected to, they can start the process for you, even if they are the R2 and it isn't normally their job or the R1, regardless. Before you ever walk in, you're kind of being judged. So if you are solo and you arrive late with no notification, then what's the impression of you at this point? And when you first walk in and they don't know anything, maybe you had a good reason for being late, but again, without that information, what does it say about you? Right? So Jerry's point is well taken, and I'll go you one better on this. It would be helpful if in your calendar, and this is what I do when I have a match, I have my contact numbers, I know what position I'm already working and who my partner is, and that way I can hit my calendar and everything I need to, all the information I need in order to make those contacts is right there. But getting back to the central point of David's point, and that is make sure your access to information is always available. Okay? Because you got 2 schools that are ready to go and we're not there. And one thing to keep in mind about this, I know you don't control the traffic, you don't control what happens in your work environment necessarily, emergencies and life happens. But when people are expecting you to be there, and I know this isn't the first time you've ever heard this, just a reminder, they don't really care. Now, after the fact, after they learn why, they may give you some grace, and that's fine. But when that's all going on, and it's 4 p.m. or it's 4:30 or whatever, they want this to start because they may have a 2.5-hour drive. There's actually a team out of Southmore High School that comes to Bartlesville often to play a match, and they have at least a 2.5-hour drive in a school bus. They need to get things started on time, right? I mean, that's probably worst case scenario, but just make sure that your contact information is easily available for you because you may have to do exactly what David tried to do or couldn't do in that case. Another thing that you might want to communicate with your partner is what I brought up earlier about the shirt variants. Well, hey, I'm just making sure I'm bringing all 3 colors, or we agreed on gray earlier. Do you still have that? Much like we do in college, I have started carrying all the colors of my shirt to all of my high school matches in case you get something spilled on it or they forget to bring the color that you agreed on. And please remember what I said about the variants. It's only for those official shirts. If you want to get with me, by the way, after this clinic tonight, I can show you where to go to purchase those. There is only one supplier in the United States that sells the shirt. Believe it or not. One supplier. Yes, sir.
I didn't hear the speech on the variance of the shirts. I thought it was on.
Okay, so we have allowed in the state of Oklahoma, and OSSA has given us permission to wear gray or blue as long as the partners match, but they have to be the official certified volleyball referee shirt. And lastly, if possible, match day, try to arrive together. That's why I underline if possible and capitalize it, because I understand that sometimes this is just not doable, or you're already there because you're doing the freshman match. And so arriving together is a moot point, and I understand that. But if it's possible, try to walk into the venue together. That always looks more professional. And here's something else, guys. It's never a bad idea to have a witness to what you have said, or even better, what you didn't say to a coach, player, fan, or administrator, to be fair. Okay, pre-match discussion. If you're an experienced official and you're working with someone who's a lot less experienced, you might want to give some more detail than normal. I would say that that's okay. One of the things, especially for you more experienced referees, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is ask a question. So Nate's this is his second year in high school or first?
Second.
Okay, second year. First with GCVOA. Now Nate's been doing a lot of club ball with us. Nate and I traveled together some in the room together. We've had a lot of good discussions about volleyball, but if he and I are reffing together, there are some things I'm going to cover even with him that I'm not going to cover with Jerry, right? So pursuant to Ray's comment, I may have to go down a road that I don't normally have to discuss with somebody because they may have never heard that information before. And you know what? If you've never heard it, until you do, you don't know it's part of the expectation. So for those of you who are more experienced referees, this is a good chance or a good opportunity for you to do a little role modeling and a little showing you, this is how we do it. And here's some things that I'm going to need your help with during the match. What do you need from me? It really should be a give and take. One of the things that I would encourage you to avoid is don't be the referee that is trying to lord it over other people. Like, oh, I know more. You just need to shut up and listen to me. That's not the kind of atmosphere we're trying to create in a pre-match discussion. Okay. Now I'm going to give you an illustration of a partner I had recently of something that happened during the match, and it ties back in with the pre-match discussion. So the reason why I put location is because where you speak with each other should be private, right? Megan and I have worked together. Megan and I know the coaches in Oklahoma. And if Megan is my R2 or vice versa, Megan and I might need to have a chat about the coach that's going to be potentially a problem tonight. And that is not anything that she and I won't broadcast to anybody. Now, you would think, well, Rich, that's common sense. Well, you would think it's common sense. But the fact that I'm having this discussion with you right now should tell you that this does not happen as much as it should. Have these discussions in private if possible. There are some venues that provide a little challenge to this, but most places have a corner you can slide off to. And this gets back to the communication the day of the match, because if you know your partner is going to be late because of an unforeseen occurrence, then you can kind of reformat what that pre-match discussion is going to include, because you literally may not have the time. So one builds on the other, which is why I wanted to start in that order. The expectation, especially, and this is really mainly for those of you who are new, in a appropriate and well-run pre-match discussion, the R1 is the leader. The R2 listens. They let the R1 lead the discussion. If they feel like the R1 didn't cover something, they wait until the end, and then they say, hey, I was just curious about this, how you wanted me to handle it. But you need to remember, guys, that the R1 is the leader of the crew. Now, that shouldn't go to their head. That should not be anything that they have pride over or make a big deal about. But we have to have some kind of teamwork here, and we have to have some kind of leadership structure. And in volleyball, this is it. Okay? Much like on the court, the R1 has purview over everything that the rule book doesn't cover. They have purview over the pre-match discussion. Linda, you mentioned some of these items. We talk about protocol in a good pre-match discussion. Here's a good example. I don't know if you guys know this rule or not, but 2 years ago, NFHS, who is the national governing body for secondary school activities and sports, made a rule for volleyball that between sets 2 and 3, there could be an additional 2 minutes given, and that is solely at the discretion of the home team. And it's for advertising and marketing purposes. In a good pre-match discussion, one partner is going to remind the other, hey, we need to make sure we ask the home coach, are you going to use this for the varsity match? And it's only in a varsity match because it's typically used in 3 out of 5 situation. Another thing that I put up here is unusual situations. I always talk to my R2, listen, if you need a sanction, what am I going to see or hear from you that lets me know that you need that? Are you going to step out really big? Are you going to stand off to the side? You know, how are we going to facilitate that? And then I, as an R1, if I'm leading the discussion, I can lay out my expectation. If I'm the R2 and I don't hear that, then I can ask. Fair enough? So those are some of the, it's not an all-inclusive list, but those are some of the big ticket items that should be covered in a good pre-match discussion with your partner. Linda, you talked about walking the floor. That is absolutely right. For those of you who are new, you should walk the entire circumference of the playing area. Why? You're looking for non-playable areas. You're looking for overhead obstructions, and where do they occur in relationship to the playing area. So if you have an overhead obstruction over here, and this isn't a playable area, then we know it's out of play, and we can advise the captains and the coaches in the pre-match meeting. But if we have an overhead obstruction here over playable area, not only do we also need to let them know about that, but we need to be prepared mentally for that to happen. And where you prepare for that is in your pre-match discussion by walking the floor with your partner. Another good reason to show up early. So in a captain's meeting, I told you, especially those of you who are new, the R1 is the crew chief. Again, we don't use that terminology, but for lack of a better expression, and the R1 runs the captain's meeting. So question and answer time. What are some things that you discuss in a captain's, and really what I should have put is captains/coaches meeting, because the head coach is required to attend. All right, so Megan, you're shaking your head yes. What's one thing you always cover with the captain and head coach? Jewelry. If you're taking notes, write this down. One of the first questions that I want you to ask in a well-run captains/coaches meeting is, head coach or head coaches, are your players legally equipped? That is the verbiage of the rule. Are your players legally equipped? Now, what's interesting is, Art knows this, Terry Bryan knows this, especially from club ball, you know this, they walk up and they've got Band-Aids right here, especially at the beginning of the season, because we know what they were doing during the summertime, they were getting pierced. This happens at the beginning of every school year. So they saunter on into the captain's meeting, and she's got a Band-Aid here, and she's got a Band-Aid here, and she has a Band-Aid here. And Megan has just said, well, I asked them, are your players legally equipped? And what does the coach typically say? Yes. All right. Here's why I'm bringing this up. It is illegal in the high school rule code, which we're using, to play with jewelry. However, and I want to be abundantly clear, and I'm telling you this as the rules interpreter, I do not want any of you looking under a Band-Aid of a minor female athlete. Did everybody hear what I just said? Okay? I understand what the rule is. And what happens if the Band-Aid comes off and exposes what you know is probably under there? We have rules for that. We have a way to take care of that. I do not want to get a phone call, email, text message from a coach because one of the referees was making them take the Band-Aid off. Do not make that request of a student athlete, especially a female student athlete. Other things in a captain's meeting, especially if you're taking notes. David?
Court ground rules.
Okay, thank you.
Overhead obstructions,
Yeah, okay.
backboards, etc.
Yep. It's come to my attention. Get a lot of complaints from coaches that referees are trying to get sub-varsity matches over with quicker. The rule is this: all sub-varsity matches are 2 out of 3, and they are all to 25 points. However, there is an exception built in that if agreement by both head coaches, not the referee, if they want to shorten the third set to 15, they may do so. And here is how you need to facilitate that verbally. You look at both coaches and say, coaches, the default is 25 points to a third set. Has there been any change in our format tonight? Format is the language of the rule. Use the language of the rule to communicate with the coaches. And they will almost always say, yeah, we want to play to 15. That's fine. Whose decision is it? Is it the decision of the referee? Ever? No. Just because you want to get out earlier is not a reason to do this. I know there are some other officials, organizations in this part of the state, not just in Tulsa, so I don't know what they're doing. To be clear, I only know what GCVOA has always taught, but what GCVOA teaches is the correct thing. And even though I'm not a member of GCVOA, I back them up completely in this. So just ask. It's really not that big of a deal. Okay? One coach specifically said to me, you know, Rich, they're really just trying to get out and make the same amount of money. And the minute they attached money to time, at that point we're done. Because you're basically telling people, I'm unprofessional and I'm trying to make this money on your time and get out of here as quickly as I can. That is not a message we want to send. It's not professional. It doesn't advance the sport of volleyball. So, to be clear, especially for those of you who are new, the coach and head coach specifically stays at the captain/coaches meeting the entire time. Okay, what is the last thing that you do in a properly formatted captain's meeting? Nate?
Coin toss.
Coin toss. How do we do a coin toss in high school? It doesn't really matter what you've done in other sports. This is what we do in volleyball. The rule is when the home team comes out, they pick their home bench. Okay? So when you do the coin toss, who calls the toss? The visitor, always. Now, I'm going to, pursuant to Art's point, I'm going to talk to you about a tournament situation. But in a duel, the visitor calls a toss. Show them both sides of the coin, ask them to call it while it's in the air. But we've still left something out. If you are new, write this down. Always turn to your R2 and say, and this, if Mike is my R2, Mike, is there anything you would like to add? Why do I do that? Well, I do it for 2 reasons. Number one, Mike and I are a team. This is a way that, remember, R1, R2 communication. This is how I demonstrate to the players, coaches, and my partner that he and I are working together. This isn't the Rich Cooper show. I want to be clear about that. But I need to ask Mike, and here's the other thing. This also gives Mike legs with the team. Okay? You are empowering your teammate when you're the R1. Communication by one of the partners and something they do specifically. Okay, sorry. During play, we've gotten the teams off the court. They've been on the end lines. Remember, I'm not covering specifically covering signals tonight, but the R1 has whistled and brought them in. They're shaking hands. We now transition to what we're doing as it relates to between what I call between the whistles. So the phrase that I came up with is ready to focus. And we're ready to focus on 3 areas, okay? And for those of you who've been doing volleyball, you'll notice how I'm making the sign 3. In volleyball, this is how we show 3. If you're not used to this, I get it. It's something to practice, all right? So stand in front of the mirror and see if you can do this. We don't do this. We don't do this. We specifically, in volleyball, in all 3 rule codes domestically, this is the number 3. Okay? So, we're ready to focus on what? On the bench areas? Have you policed the court? Now, when I say police the court, I don't want you to interpret that as being a cop. I'm looking on that, look for bags, and you got that bag 1 centimeter. No, we're not doing that. We're just making sure things are safe. Okay? We want to make sure things are playable. Sometimes a water bottle gets left there. You say, hey, coach, can you grab that for me? We're not jumping on anybody. We're not yelling at them. We're not mad. We're not upset. Right? We'll put a smile on our face when we ask, right? But hey, coach, could you grab that for me? I appreciate it. Maybe you grab an assistant coach. I don't care. But that's just an example of something that you might look at on the bench areas. Some other things that you look at on the bench areas. Are the girls seated when they need to be? Okay. When do girls need to be seated? I say girls because we don't have any OSSA boys volleyball. So when do the players and bench personnel need to be seated? I'm sorry? Well, during game, but what's going to be the first time that you're going to, quote unquote, and start enforcing that bench rule? Former coach, Linda?
During play.
Well, okay, but we're talking about the R1's blowing the girls in, they're shaking hands, 6 girls on the court do their thing, the other players come over. At what point do they technically have to be seated? Bob?
Before R2 gives the court to the R1.
Okay, that's a really good answer. When I do this as the R2, but when I, as the R2, do this, I'm telling the R1, everything is ready for you to beckon for serve, blow the whistle. That's at the time we need to make sure everybody's seated. Now, are you going to march over there? Hey, you need to sit down. No, not doing that. Relax, right? Relax. You're going to catch more flies with honey than you are vinegar. Hey, coach, did you get those girls for me? All right, I appreciate it. Thanks, coach. Right? Guys, we are not there to argue with the coaches. We're not there to get on people. So this whole process of communication, you got to think about the tone. We're going to get to this in a little bit, the tone of your voice, the look on your face, etc. So when we're focusing on the bench areas, the word focus, this is what I want you to hear. I'm aware of it, and I've taken care of what needs to be taken care of. Okay. We're also ready to focus on a crew. This is, and Jerry, I don't know if you've been apprised of this. I know I have. But there is a push right now at the upper echelons of volleyball, and things always filter down for the R1 to look at each official, and this includes the line judges. So looking around, making eye contact with the line judge on both corners and the R2, and that's what I mean by focus on the crew. Before I ever beckon for serve, my nonverbal communication should have looked at my corners and at my partner, right? And something I've started doing when my partner does that So Linda, if we work together this year, I'm going to do this. And I'm just, all I'm saying is, hey, I'm ready. You know, so when you do that, we're ready to go. Because I want my partner, if I'm the R2, I want my partner to know, hey, Rich has got this, or whoever, right? So think about how you communicate nonverbally. Here's something else. Don't be over there grimacing. I've had a terrible day, but I'm ready to officiate. I'm ready to chew that coach out for you, right? Is that what you're really ready for? No. You're ready to referee some volleyball. Guys, this is volleyball. This is not the end of the world. And my way of saying volleyball is everything's fixable. We can undo points. We can do replays. We can fix the score sheet. We can change a call. It's all good. So when you're focusing on the crew, be approachable. Have a smile on your face. Let's do this in an upward and positive manner. When I was putting this presentation together, both for the sake of time and not stepping on what was being done in another clinic, there's some things that are done during this, and what Art said is one of them that I intentionally left out.
Okay.
Not to say it's not important. I just didn't want to cover something that was already being addressed. So if it's not, just let me give this blurb. One of the reasons why I mentioned that you start reffing the match before you arrive, because I need to be in the mindset of creating rapport before I ever attempt to create rapport. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it. It's just not going to happen. Okay? So, okay, I want to touch on this and go back to what I just said, even about your comment over here. Again, this is why you start your reffing before you even show up. You
already know the
right, because you already know who the coach is.
Yeah.
So, for those of you who are new to volleyball, what I'm not saying you're new to sports, but you're new to our sport. What I would ask you to do is look at who the head coaches are, kind of know as you get to know them, kind of know how they are, and what you are going to, and even more importantly, sometimes not going to say. And then lastly, during play, focus on the play. Now, this encompasses several areas, okay? This encompasses several areas. One is the play itself, right? The individual touch of the volleyball, how their offense is set up, how their defense is set up. When I say focus on play, I also mean the pace of play. How's this going? I want to give you an illustration of this. Understand you're not going to be dealing with Puerto Rican teams. This is just an illustration. So every year, USA Volleyball at the national championships allows the boys and girls teams from Puerto Rico to attend their respective national championships, because Puerto Rico is a protectorate of the United States, a territory or whatever it designated as. So sometimes when they get behind, they like to slow things down. And in this particular case, my R2 steps out, calls out of rotation. He was clearly out of rotation. And so, you know what? This is part of what's going on in the play. And I'm already well ahead of this because I've just been repping teams from that area for a long time. And the captain came over, wanted to argue after having already argued his case with my R2. And he's now pleading with me, right? As the captain. This is not a discussion. Please stop talking. I mean, it was that blunt. Why? Because I was doing what I'm asking you to do. I had to be focused on that even before we got there. And that's what I'm asking you to do. You need to be focused on what could happen in that play. That player could run off and shank the ball, and it's going to skim off that big scoring device that sits right above both courts. And you need to be mentally ready to make a call on that. By the way, who else can help you make a call like that? Your line judges can. Hey guys, did either one of you see the ball? I mean, but why are you calling them over? Because you are already mentally ready to handle it. I'll give you another illustration. Are you mentally ready to handle a back rotate situation, an out of rotation, or a really bad set mechanic by the non-setter who has bricks for hands. Are you ready for that? Because if you're not focused on the play, you will be now. I don't want to get too far afield because we're talking about R1 and R2 communication. But when I say focus on the play, I mean that because that translates into what you do to help your partner during that play, right? I'm going to give you worst case scenario. Now, I told you earlier about war stories. This is a true story, but this is in pursuit of a point, and it could happen to you. This is why I share it. 5 years ago, I'm in Houston, and we're at this same boys national tournament I was talking about. We have a back row setter who is extremely talented, and this kid was so smart. He knew when he jumped, if this is the net, here are his hands. And he waited, got down, and then pushed the ball so that when he contacted it and pushed it over, part of the ball was in the plane of the net because it had to do this to go over. And man, he jumped so high, he's eye level, his hands are eye level with me on the stand. My partner from New York steps out and goes, tweet, which in USA volleyball is a back row attack. In high school, it would have been this. She calls my back row attack, doesn't even give me a chance to say, no, this is the unofficial official signal to coach. Coach, I got it. I got the ball at least partially in the plane. What do you think happened the rest of the match when I called her over and said, listen, that was very nice, but I said, hey, we're gonna do a replay because I clearly had it in a plan. I just don't want to create a disadvantage. That is almost word for word how I said it. I was nice. I was a teammate. She shut down immediately. You know why? Because she is not focused on the play. She's just focused on what she's feeling and thinking. This is all about her. That can't happen with a team. All right? That can't happen with a team. If you're focused, you guys are going to be together. And if the R1 is going to issue a replay and you're the R2, your only response in that case would be, okay, I got it. I'll go sell it to the coach, right? Because we're a team. Now, I'm not giving you that war story for some cathartic reason. I'm telling you that worst case scenario because that's about the worst position I've really ever been in with a referee, and she sold me out to the other coach like that. She even went over and I read her lips and she said, I don't know why he's calling that either. Championship is over there. The head officials are there. They're watching this. The coach told the head referees, wow, those two referees were not on the same page. They were not working together as a team. That's almost word for word what the head referees told me. So, do I think you're going to get in that tomorrow? No. I just want to drive home the point that if we're going to communicate effectively with each other, we both have to be focused on the play of what's going on right then. Don't get ahead of it. Deal with what's going on right then, and that focus will allow you to be there when you're ready. You know, it's kind of like when that hitter goes up and hits the ball, you don't watch the ball to the line, you get ahead of it to the line. Because the line's not moving, right? That's all focus. You know, if you're not on the stand, you're not doing this, you know, that's all being out of focus. So both referees have to be working together, and that's what I mean when I say ready to focus on the play. All that's encompassed in those two words. All right, so let's keep going. I think we have about 3 slides of during play. If you are new to volleyball, write this word down. When you are the partner of someone who looks stiff and tense, what do you want to do? Help them, right?
Worry.
But do you know that psychologically speaking, that you now start focusing on their state of anxiety, tenseness, whatever you want to call it, and it actually affects your ability to relax yourself? Have you ever heard someone clear their throat so often that you want to start clearing your throat? Someone yawns and now you want to yawn. It's a non-relaxed state catches on with other people, right? Just like smiling. Some stranger smiles at you, you're like, well, I don't know them, but they're smiling, that's nice. There's a tendency for people to smile back, right? You know one of the reasons I like working with Linda? Because not only does everybody know Linda, but she's always in a good mood. I'm serious. And the match goes better. Because I'm just happier because Linda's usually over there, everything's good, Rich. When you are looking at your partner, don't assume a look on their face means anything but the look on their face. Don't read too much into their nonverbal communication. Okay? So if they're grimacing, just go, okay, they're grimacing. Don't think, oh, well, they must be mad at me. All right? Don't think that. Just go, they're grimacing. They could be grimacing for a variety of reasons. Having said that, I want to go back to point one. As the partner who's not looking relax. See how this works? So on the one hand, you relax. On the other hand, if you're not relaxed, don't assume anything. That's how we work together as a team. And that's how we communicate effectively, because that frees you up from worrying about somebody else that you can't control anyway. Another item, and this is really big. So I'm going to make a comment to those of you who are new to volleyball officiating. Okay. Don't get into bad habits to start your officiating career in volleyball by doing unofficial, extraneous body movements, thinking that you are helping. I'm going to give you an illustration of this, okay? Because what I'm getting ready to describe is what I call intuitive officiating. We intuitively shake our head, or excuse me, nod our head, shake our head for things in life. That's just a normal human reaction to stimuli that's coming in and to which we respond. But when it comes to officiating, one of the problems that we have is that we want to officiate the way we live our life, and oftentimes it's the wrong thing to do. Please let me give you an example. Contact number 1 is a forearm pass. Contact number 2 is a set, which was low. Contact number 3 is a push of the volleyball, but it gets into the net, comes back, and then there's some type of hit to get the ball over. Was that legal or illegal? Illegal. Okay.
Was it touched by the other team?
It wasn't touched by the other team. Good point. Wasn't untouched by the other team. So what do we have? What's the signal for those of you who are more experienced? Showed up high. It's 4 hits. Okay. If you're the R2, now I'm not getting into the whole mechanical thing, but I am offering him a mechanical example. Who knows what the proper mechanic for the R2 to do to the R1? You're close, David. Okay, everybody look at Jerry. See where Jerry has it? Jerry has it on his shoulder. Please don't do it in the middle of your chest. Get it up here. This is where we are training your eyes to look. Thank you, Jerry. Okay, you don't do this. Okay, that's extraneous. It's not official, and it isn't helpful, but it is certainly intuitive. Because you're trying to tell your partner, hey, no, they can't do that. That's why you're doing this with your head. But you're almost communicating something that they have no idea what you're talking about, right? So don't get into bad habits as a new referee. And if you're an experienced referee and you're doing this, then I would kindly ask you to put that in abatement and use the official 4. So what I tell people, you want to go back to a pre-match, is in a properly formatted pre-match, R2, I only want negative information. If you don't have 4 hits, don't do anything, because you're just going to confuse me. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means. It's not official. We don't use it. And all you're going to do is confuse me, and then you're going to distract me on the stand, and now I'm not following the play. We either have 4 hits, or we have nothing. What does nothing mean, David Jordan? Play on. See how easy that is? So for those of you who are new, please don't get into bad habits. Okay? Really good referees that work in any sport at any level do these types of things well with their crew, whoever that is. They've learned the art of communicating, to go back to our subtitle of this clinic, because they don't do extraneous things that cause disruption in the thought process of other people. But I'm given discreet help. Art sees it. What does Art do? He makes a choice. I believe Rich. Their back was to me. Tweet. The point's this way because it was contacted multiple times. Art doesn't have to interpret. He doesn't even have to nuance this. I'm giving him information. He takes it or doesn't take it. But my point is, it's official, and I'm holding it in the correct place. Why am I not holding it here? They will get into this when they talk to you about mechanics specifically. That's a discussion for another time. So, use correct discrete signaling. This is the only proper signal for 4 hits. Okay? This is the only proper signal for touch. It's not here. It's not here. It's above your head so that your face is not obscured. This is the only proper signal for down or timeout to this team. It's not, you don't point to where the ball lands, for example. That's what we call intuitive officiating. Intuitively, that's international, by the way. I didn't know if you know that, but it's interesting that you gave that signal. But if you point to where the ball is and you don't know any better, what you're doing is intuitive, what I call intuitive officiating. You're pointing down, but you're pointing to where the ball hit, which if you don't know any better makes sense, doesn't it? Because we tend to focus our attention and we tend to point to objects. Well, where did the object hit? Well, it hit here, so I'm going to do this. The problem is here, this, you're calling down, this is a center line violation, and from back here, I'm not sure what you're calling. Okay? So I see newer referees do this, no criticism intended. I just don't want you to get into a bad habit. And they're doing this for center line, right? We used to draw the line. That's an old mechanic. This is the only signal for down, 45 degrees away from the bottom, middle of the court. Why do we always want to do it in the same place? Because we're communicating something very specific. And the reason why this is relevant in this clinic or module is because I'm telling my partner what I have too. If Terry's my R1 and he's screened and I step out and do this, what am I telling Terry?
Balls down.
Ball's down, blow the whistle. Right? Terry knows what that means. And he's going, oh great, Rich has got it. I was scream, whistle, point this way because the ball's down. I'm not out here doing this, and Terry goes, what in the world is that guy doing? Get a clue, Rich, because I gave the right signal. Okay? That's what I mean by this particular comment. And when I was putting this module together, I specifically added this because I don't want you to feel pressured to make some kind of call up this for sub. And I will tell you, the high school manual says to do this for sub. If you do this, you will never hear a comment from me except unofficially. So officially, unofficially, I'm going to tell you, just do this. But if you're insistent on doing it the NFHS way, you can do this. This is what the rule book says. But for those of us who do club in college, we close our fists, and I am trying to get OSSAA to agree with me that I can make a executive decision and we're all going to do this. Here's my point. Just do the correct signal. I have a little humor there, but do the right signal and do it at the right time. Fair enough? All right, this is a big ticket item. Again, feel free to comment or ask questions. But centering, okay. Art, do you mind helping me by standing up, just saying where you're at? So, Art is my R2, I'm the R1, all right? So at the end of the play, Art attempts to get to fault side. So we're going to say fault side is on the other side of Alicia. So I've blown the whistle, tweet, I go over here, Art moves to this side, he mirrors me, and where should I be looking and where should Art be looking right now? Right at each other. Now, Art looks away to that side because he's going to start doing his own thing. I signaled down, but Art doesn't see that, and he thought it was 4 hits. So I'm here, and he's giving 4 hits. One of us is wrong. What prevents this?
By looking at each other.
Yeah, we call it centering. So, well, let's demonstrate that if we can. All right, so this time I want you to move. When you transition all the way on the other side of Alicia. Now, I've blown the whistle, so she's the pole, if you will, in this example. Thank you for playing along. Tweet, I'm doing this. Now, watch what I'm doing. I wait. He gets his arm up. We're going down together. It's not a race. I always want you to not just center on your partner. If you're the R1, you need to wait so that you can do your mechanic together. And for those of you who are new, please don't get into a bad habit of doing your own thing by not centering. If you watch really good referees work, they stare you down. It's a little uncomfortable at first, but once you get used to it, it's not awkward anymore. In fact, when they don't do it, you notice it. One last comment pursuant to this, and then I'm going to take questions and comments. If you are the R1 and your R2 has the call, net, center line, whatever, they have to get to fault side. So if this microphone stand approximates the pole, and I'm over here on the blocker side, and I have a net violation on this side, and in this case, David, you don't have to stand up, but you're going to be my partner. So tweet, yeah, but you don't have to stand up. So I'm going to whistle on this side. The fault, remember, is over on my left. I walk over, I have net, I have player, and now David gives the point. But he's waited until Rich gets in position and finishes his mechanic. So another bad habit to not get into is wait for your R2 to finish whatever their mechanic is before you award point as the R1. And this is kind of pursuant to what Art's point was about pace. You just need to wait. It is not a race because, guys, nothing is going on until you authorize it. Now, here's one caveat, and then Jerry, I want to take your comment, and Linda, I want to take your comment. The caveat is you may briefly look away as the R2. If you have a sub running up, you may briefly look away to make eye contact to let them know, yes, I see you, and then go back to your partner. But that's the only time that you want to break in that centering time. Okay, Jerry? Okay, that's fine. Linda?
That's all right. I was just going to say, just looking around, some of you will do junior high where you are by yourself. You do not have a partner. So when you do the mechanic I always just look straight across at my scorekeeper and give my signals, and I hold, making sure that they're seeing me, and then that way, your coaches see you as well. So that's just a good time to practice when you don't have an R2 and you are on the stand, is make yourself look across at your score table, and then that way it gets you in the mindset of always looking.
Now, see, this is what a good experienced referee does. They already know what I was going to comment on, and but I'm being serious. We're going to talk about that, but so let's just go down that road one more step, then I'll take Jerry's comment. One thing past that, when you're working by yourself, tell your scorekeeper ahead of time, I don't have a partner, and that's why I'm looking at you. I had this happen. And the young lady was a little disconcerted. And I said, well, what's wrong? She goes, Richie kept staring at me. I said, okay, that's my fault. I should have explained to you that my normal mechanic is to look at the paid referee who now isn't here, and I'm looking at you because that's where I sent her. And she went, oh, okay, we're good then. One thing that I would add to that is, as you're learning, especially if you're newer, as you're learning how to referee volleyball, if you'll take your cue from a more experienced referee and you'll cue on their eye contact, then it should prompt you to ask, why do they keep looking at me? So maybe during a timeout you say, hey, can I come across and ask you questions? I'm learning here, so tell me why you keep looking at me. And they may say, hey, I was going to tell you after the set, but I'll tell you now, I need you to do this. Oh, okay. be heads up about their intent eye contact with you. Because in volleyball, I can't jump off the stand and run over a conference with you every time. It's not like basketball, it's not like baseball, it's not like football. It is a very uniquely officiated sport. And the R1 in our culture of this sport stays on the stand. So you may have to ask until you get more experience, why do they keep looking at me? It may not be a negative thing, it may just be, I need you to do this, whatever that is. Mark?
One thing for our newer officials, since you will be officiating on your own for sub-varsity matches, and you don't have an R2, you've got to rely on your score table to take care of the substitutes. So before the match starts, you need to talk to your scorekeeper and come up with a signal that they can give you to let you know that they're ready to go on after a sub. And I always tell my substitutes and I tell the coaches, since there's no R2, the score table is going to reach the substitutes. And that way you give the score table the ability to control it and they don't get lost in the middle of the match.
Always good advice. All right. Now, I just demonstrated something, and I did that purposely because of the next point. If I want to talk to somebody in life, and they're across the way, and they can't hear me, what's a normal thing to do? Damn, did you hear what I said? We don't do that in volleyball. Okay? In volleyball culture, in officiating, if you want to go across the court, you put your toes on the sideline, you look at your R1 and you say, you don't yell. We don't yell across the court in volleyball normally. That's not something we do. And the R1, if they feel it's okay, they'll say, yeah, come on. Now, why am I being so formal about this? One of the reasons is I want you to do something that's counterintuitive for some of you. For some of you, you feel like when you have a question, why should you just walk over and ask? I've had referees do this to me in between points, not just during a timeout. I'm like, oh. No, I'm not being critical. There's always a learning curve, but don't get in the habit of thinking that you have the purview just to walk across to your R1. Does that mean that they are God, small g, on the stand? No, it just means this is our protocol. This is just how we do it. Just accept it. There's a second reason why you may walk across. If I'm working with you and we have just majorly kicked something, the house is burning down, what we affectionately call it, I'm not going to ask. You're going to see me walking across the court. And if I'm walking, when I say me, I'm the generic R2. If your R2 is walking across the court and they've got a look of intensity on their face, relax and go, okay, well, in their mind, they have a good reason for coming across and I need to listen. Keeping in mind your desire to calm things down, okay? There's a happy medium here without going across to talk to the R1. Now, I don't want to get too far in the weeds because this is really more about sanctions and but we're already going down this road, so let's finish the thought process. Coach, listen, I really understand that you're upset about that, and I'm not disagreeing that you saw that from your angle, but we really need to end this, okay? I pause, pursuant to your idea about decompressing things. I need a yellow card and say, Coach, please. Sit back. I turn around, do what I ever do what I'm doing at the book, and that kind of meets that goal that you were describing about allowing the coach a little space and allowing the coach a little time. Because the other thing, and this is just kind of a top-down thing, guys, when a sanction is warranted, when it has been earned, we're done at that point. There really is no discussion needed with the R1. Now, the caveat to that is I have requested, in fact, I just did it last week, in between sets. I said, Moose, the guys in his booth, said, Moose, he's like, yeah, come on, Moose. I said, listen, here's what's going on. Here's what I warned the teams about in between sets. If I pull this out, this is why because I know you couldn't hear any of that. Now I did do that, but that was already a natural break, and no attention is no attention is focused on us, because you got to remember, anytime you go across to talk to the R1, who's looking? Everybody. Okay, we'll hit that, Jerry. Gary just gave me the, we're going to be done in 15 minutes. I mentioned this earlier, and I said I'd get to it later. This is later. Please be aware of the tone of voice that you have with your partner, right? It isn't just a smile on your face. You can say some really mean things smiling. Man, I really think you're an idiot. Right? You've got to be one of the worst referees around. It's kind of, you talk to a dog that way, don't you? Because the dog has no idea what you're saying. You just hear tone of voice. So, tone of voice. Eye contact. Don't be so like the mad scientist look, I call it, when you're talking to somebody. Oh, you could be a student, we can weird. Sorry, you didn't see what she was doing over there, it was kind of funny. But make sure that when you're talking to your partner, it might be loud. You may have to look up because they're on the stand, and maybe the stand is not conducive for them to get lowered for you to have that conversation. So I try to maintain good eye contact when I'm talking, because the other thing is this. If Art's my R1, he says, Rich, okay, I understand what you're telling me in this situation. I need you to do this. I want my eye contact to reflect, I've heard you, I'm listening, and that's what you're going to get. Because he's the guy. He's not God on the stand, but he's the guy. So I want that eye contact to back it up. So the eye contact is going to be used for a variety of things, but don't look away and down, because looking away and down when you're talking to people tells them you're not confident. It tells them you don't believe in what you're discussing or speaking about. Maintain that eye contact. Just don't get that furrowed brow and try to, it's like you're drilling holes right through with your eyes. You don't want to do that. Calm your face, right? But give them good eye contact. And be aware of your posture. And I'm not talking, they're going to talk about mechanics, which that's not what I'm discussing here. I'm talking about when you're working with the line judges and your partner, and it could be the table crews, just be aware that your posture is not like this. This is a look of defeat. This is a look of, I'm not confident. Your shoulders get rounded. I don't care how tall you are. I don't care what your height is. Use good posture, because so much of what we read into people or about people comes from that. Just like the example we gave with Dale earlier. And level of demeanor. I'm sorry that is getting cut off a little bit. Kind of naturally laid back. And people like that, right? They respond very positively to that. So when you're in a firestorm in a match, relax. It's always fixable. Don't allow your demeanor to be so rigid and hard that it's just not the end of the world. We can get through this together. All right? I got your back, Mike. And hopefully you have mine. All right. Last slide, and we're going to bring this to a summation, if you will. When you are at the last point of the set of the last match of the night, or of that particular match, last point of the match, last set, don't get in a rush with your signals. And remember to center. Remember that both the R1 and the R2 do this. I know you'll get into mechanics at another clinic, but you both do this. Don't forego this. Okay? Much like earlier, I told you, center throughout the end and then start scanning your benches at the last point of the last set of that match, because you're anticipating getting off the stand and getting off your feet and getting a drink of water, or you have to use the restroom, or you're worried about avoiding that coach, or whatever it is you're concerned about. Don't rush your signal sequence, because that's just very ineffective communication with your partner. And I would also submit even though this is the point of the clinic, your communication to other people in the gym. Finish, okay? You're the R1, whistle, bring them in. Now you're done. Now you can get off the stand. If you're the R2, this will be the last thing you do, and then you can turn around to make sure that everything is good. But here's one last reason to have follow through. As an R2, I always make sure everything's copacetic with my partner before they get off the stand in case we have an unruly fan, we have a coach that wants to talk to them. I may have to step in and go, hey, coach, we're kind of done with that. But if I'm not paying attention, I don't have my partner's back. And now they're hot-footing it across the court to talk to Art. So finish your mechanic, finish your centering on the last point of the last set of the match. Follow the exit strategy that we already discussed, and I don't want to rehash that, but just remember where you're going and with whom. And by the way, if you need to, you have permission to take the student athlete line judges with you to the locker room or office, wherever. When do they need to know that information? At the beginning. While that administrator was doing that, I called my line judges over and said, listen, things have changed. At the end of this match, do not go back to the scores table. You guys meet. I told the LJ2 where to meet. The LJ1, you meet in here. We're going together. I got those girls off the court for about 15 minutes. And then lastly, if it's possible, leave the venue together. Always a good idea, especially if it was a contentious match. You never know how a parent, coach, or player is going to interpret the job you did that night. Just saying.
And I like that for a female. I like it with my partner, whether we're both females or it's a male and a female. I've had a lot of partners that say, I'm out of here, and they grab their stuff and they're gone. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll walk out by myself, even though it's dark outside. I am a big girl, but I just think that's kind of a courtesy thing, especially when you're working with a female.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a well-taken point. Okay, before you tear out of here, and I know that with the original schedule was 6 to 8, I want to remind you of the clinic that's on the 29th. Gary is back here, I believe.
We got one 19th.
Yes.
Yes.
And next week's
Yes.
Next Thursday.
the next one's hardest, Steve, because we couldn't get
Right.
But the last,
Okay.
But the last one's back here.
And just remember, this is the third year we're doing it. You'll have whoever the clinician is, and then I'm going to come in and do the rules portion. So if you're going to be here, you're going to get a 2-for-1 deal. And I will have a state OSSA sign-in sheet for you to sign, so the 2 things. So I encourage you to come back to that if you would. Thanks for being a good audience. Thanks for listening.